right, so this is our first design challenge, and it's an easy one, very approachable with great results and very little fuss. It's a stamping design challenge. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is go around and find some stampable objects or other kinds of junk that you can use to dip into the wax and then stamp onto your work surface, which I'm using paper, but you could also do any of the project starters on fiber as well, obviously. So I've collected some paper towel rolls that I've cut into smaller pieces and shapes. It's the cardboard box that your materials kit came in, and also some other materials you might find, cardstock you might find around the house. If you have old cookie cutters, they work great if they're small enough to dip into your wax tray. But any kinds of junk you have in your junk drawer that can be dipped to create different shapes, marker caps, glue lids, small little box tops and other things like that. You can also cut a piece of cardstock if you want and cut it into thin strips that you can then fold up to make different shapes with straight edges very easily. You could also cut a cereal box, works really well. The cardboard from the cereal box is a nice thinner line, but also very durable. So for this design challenge, we're working abstractly. We're not really creating any kind of realistic designs. We're going to do it mainly with just different shapes. So I've folded up a little triangle shape there. I've got my circular shapes here. And for design, I like to think in terms of 3s and 5s. So different shapes, you might have 3 different shapes, 5 different shapes, however many you want really. But when you're ready to start, go ahead and dip one of your stamps or stampable surfaces. Let it heat up for a moment in your wax warmer just so it can start absorbing the wax and bring the stamp itself up to temperature. And then I slowly, carefully brush the inside of the warmer lid and carry it over and just press it down firmly onto my work surface, whatever that might be. And then I like to do repetition in this stamp project, so I'll just go back and again thinking about number 3, number 5, or however much you want, going back a few more times to create a little bit of a repetition of a certain shape on my paper as I go. So it's important to think about when you're doing just a simple stamp challenge like this, thinking about your basic design elements, trying to balance out your shapes that you do, trying to balance out the lines that you use. You notice there I did get a drip, so in order to correct that, you will get drips sometimes, it's just part of the process, but in order to correct that, I'm going to try and go and actually make it like it was an intentional part of the project and add some dots around the design in order to kind of unify everything together so that one drip doesn't stand out as much. You can also use cardboard for nice straight edges. Instead of trying to draw a straight line with your wax tools or your paintbrushes, just dipping and repeating that line on your paper or on your fabric can give you nice straight lines. You could curve it as well if you wanted to, obviously, as you go. And here I'm just making this design until I decide that I'm happy with it. And I'll repeat, I've got 3 lines there. I'm creating just any kind of design elements, variety of sizes and shapes is always good to give more visual interest to your project. You can also play with the size of certain shapes. So I cut that paper towel roll and cut a piece off of it so that I could then tape it back up in a smaller diameter. So playing with the same size of your shape, or excuse me, the same shape, but making it a different size can also make your designs more dynamic. So here I've done up a couple of different ones, a couple on paper, a couple on fabric, and I'm ready to start applying the dye to these pieces. Each of the designs is nothing super fancy, but again, this is just an intro project that we're learning some design basics and learning the basics of the process. But I've waxed out everything that I want to stay white. So when I go in and add color to these pieces, the white lines that I've done here in the beginning will all be protected from any other colors at any time that I go and apply to my projects. So this, I've mixed up a turquoise. First, I'm going to do some direct dyeing on one of my pieces so that I can get a fuller range of colors. So I'm just going to go in here and dye some of the places on the paper with turquoise, and so that I can when I dye it my second color, I can get some color mixing in here. And then the next one that I do, I will just do them with tub dyeing, just submerging them in dye so that the whole things will turn my turquoise color. So now I've got my tray here. I'm just going to pour all that color on top, just a little bit at first, and then I'll put my next piece in and pour the rest of the dye on top of it. You can see how quickly it starts to absorb the color and protect, or the wax protects the fibers underneath so that they can't pick up any color. Pour the rest of my dye on, and now these are ready to soak. And after 20 or 30 minutes, I'll pull these out. Paper pieces really don't need to soak for that long, but the fabric pieces might as well just leave it in that long anyways, because the fabric pieces are going to soak. So now they've dried, and you see, just skipping forward, what I've done now is I've waxed out all the places I want to stay blue. So wax has been melted in here. We've skipped ahead. And now I'm going in and I'm going to batch dye everything, submerge everything in dye. So the blue will be protected where it's been waxed, and then the yellow will absorb anywhere that hasn't been waxed yet. So my white lines will stay white, my blue spaces will stay blue, and now with this yellow dye, the second color I've chosen, I get a green. So here I've skipped forward to the end where these pieces are ready to be cleaned, and you can see different results that you get over the course of time and how quickly your pieces can really transform after doing more and more layers of waxing, dyeing, waxing, and dyeing. So on the bottom left, you see that piece never went into a black dye at the end, but it did go into a red dye as well. And even though it went into a blue and a yellow, the green was so light that I was able to go back in and add another red dye on top of it and get a nice bright primary color design. And then the other two pieces did get into a black dye. I waxed out some green lines and some green shapes that I wanted to keep before submerging it into the last color. And you see the difference in values that you get from adding it into that black dye versus keeping it the same. So here, when I cleaned all the wax off, this is a finished product. No black has been applied here, but I get some nice bright bold colors just from mixing in. That went into 3 different colors and 3 different iterations of wax as well. This piece here, you can see just how dynamic it gets by putting it into the black dye. Even though it was only 2 colors and then the black, having the contrast between the whites and then the brighter colors really punches it up to a different level when you add the black dye.